The morning began like any other in Maplewood Terrace. I kissed my wife goodbye, helped my 10-year-old son Liam pack his lunch, and stood on our front porch watching him head toward the bus stop at the end of our cul-de-sac. We'd only lived in this neighborhood for 3 months, and while the HOA's rules were a little extreme, we were getting used to them. What I didn't expect was for my son to end up in the middle of the HOA president's next ridiculous crusade for order. I was halfway through my first cup of coffee when my phone buzzed. It was Liam. "Dad," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "There's a lady at the bus stop yelling at me about my backpack. She says it breaks HOA rules and I'm not allowed to wait here anymore." I could hear a sharp, shrill voice in the background, demanding to speak to me. "I'll be right there," I said, keeping my tone calm even as anger began to boil inside. I grabbed my keys, then paused. I decided against taking my department vehicle. No need to start this with authority. When I arrived at the bus stop, the scene nearly made me laugh in disbelief. A woman in her late 40s stood towering over my son, waving her hands dramatically. She had perfectly highlighted blonde hair, styled in that unmistakable "Can I speak to the manager?" cut, and she was dressed head to toe in expensive athleisure wear. Her focus, however, was laser-sharp on Liam's Marvel superhero backpack. It was bright red and blue, the one I'd bought him for his birthday last month. The way he clutched it against his chest told me this was about more than a backpack. He was scared and confused. "Excuse me," I said, my tone even and measured, the way years of police training had taught me. "Is there a problem here?" The woman turned, her face contorted with self-righteous fury. "Yes, there is a problem," she snapped. "I'm Brenda Carmichael, president of the Maplewood Terrace Homeowners Association, and your son is in clear violation of our community's aesthetic guidelines." I rested a hand on Liam's shoulder to reassure him. "What violation would that be exactly?" I asked. Brenda pulled out her phone and started furiously scrolling through what I assumed was the HOA handbook. Her expression brightened when she found what she was looking for. Section 12, paragraph 3. She said with smug satisfaction, "All items visible from community property must conform to the neighborhood's color palette of earth tones and neutrals." That thing is bright red and blue. It's completely out of compliance. I blinked in disbelief. "You're telling me my son's backpack, the one he uses to carry, his schoolbooks, violates HOA rules because it's colorful?" Brenda crossed her arms and lifted her chin like a queen addressing a peasant. "Rules are rules. The bus stop is on HOA property, and we have standards to maintain. If we let one child bring a garish backpack, soon everyone will. Then property values will start to drop." I took a slow breath. "Carmichael," I said evenly, "my son is a child, waiting for his school bus. His backpack isn't a permanent fixture in the neighborhood. This seems like a bit of an overreach." Her face turned a deep shade of red. "Don't you lecture me about HOA authority," she snapped. "I've been president for 6 years, and I know every bylaw by heart. Your son needs to leave this bus stop immediately, or I'll call security." I couldn't help but chuckle. Security for a child's backpack. Liam looked up at me, confused and nervous. I squeezed his shoulder. "It's okay, buddy. You're not doing anything wrong." Just then, the school bus appeared at the end of the street. I nodded toward it. "Get ready." But before he could move, Brenda stepped in front of him. "He's not getting on that bus from this stop," she said, her voice sharp as glass. "Not with that backpack. Those are the rules." That was enough. "Ms. Carmichael," I said calmly, "I'm not only Liam's father. I'm Chief Marcus Thorne of the Maplewood Police Department. You're currently preventing a minor from accessing public school transportation. That could be considered obstruction." Brenda froze, her eyes widening for a moment before narrowing again. "Being police chief doesn't exempt you from following HOA rules," she sneered, though her tone wavered. The bus pulled up with a hiss of brakes. "Go ahead, Liam," I said, guiding him past her. Brenda's hand shot out, grabbing my arm. Her acrylic nails dug into my skin. "We're not done here," she hissed. I carefully pried her hand off. "Please don't put your hands on me again," I said quietly. Liam hesitated at the bus door. I gave him a reassuring nod. He climbed aboard, and the bus drove off. Brenda pointed a finger at me, her voice low but venomous. "You've just made a serious enemy, Chief. I'm calling an emergency HOA meeting tonight. We'll see how well your family fits in this community once the fines start piling up." I kept my expression calm. "Ms. Carmichael, I'd love to see the exact bylaw that gives the HOA authority over children's school supplies. Can you show me where that's outlined?" Her confidence wavered for the first time. "It falls under aesthetic guidelines," she said stiffly. "As president, I have discretionary power to interpret them." "I see," I said with a faint smile. "Then I look forward to discussing your interpretation at the meeting tonight. I'll bring the county code enforcement officer along. They've been meaning to review some HOA regulations for compliance with state law." That made her flinch. A small twitch ran across her face before she regained her composure. "Just keep your son in that eyesore of a backpack off community property," she snapped, then turned on her heel and marched toward her pristine, picture-perfect home. I stood there for a long moment watching her retreat. Then I decided this wasn't going to be handled quietly, not this time. That afternoon, I started making calls. First to our family attorney, then to a few neighbors who had quietly shared stories of their own run-ins with Brenda's obsessive rule enforcement. By the time evening rolled around, I had a clearer picture of what we were dealing with, a pattern of harassment and behavior that skirted the edge of legality. The emergency HOA meeting was set for 7 p.m. at the community clubhouse. I arrived early in uniform. Normally, I wouldn't show up to a neighborhood meeting that way. But sometimes a reminder of authority helps keep things civil. Brenda was already there when I walked in, flanked by her loyal followers. She stopped mid-sentence when she saw me. Her expression faltered for half a second before she straightened her back and pretended not to be rattled. "Good evening," I said pleasantly, nodding to the room. "I understand tonight's discussion concerns backpack regulations." A few neighbors chuckled quietly, which only seemed to tighten Brenda's jaw. "This isn't a laughing matter, Chief Thorne," she said, putting heavy emphasis on my title. "We're here to maintain community standards." The meeting began with Brenda launching into what she clearly thought was a persuasive presentation. She'd even prepared a slideshow, complete with a zoomed-in photo of Liam's Marvel backpack, which she must have snapped that very morning. "This," she declared, dramatically pointing to the projection, "is exactly the kind of eyesore that drags down our property values." When she finally finished, she looked at me expectantly, as if waiting for an apology. Instead, I stood and addressed the room. "Thank you, Ms. Carmichael, for bringing this issue to everyone's attention. But before I respond about the backpack, I'd like to discuss something far more serious." I opened a folder I'd brought with me. "This morning, Ms. Carmichael physically prevented my 10-year-old son from accessing his school bus. She grabbed his arm and blocked his path. I have statements from 2 witnesses who saw the entire incident from their homes." The room fell silent. You could hear the air conditioning hum. When I intervened, I continued. Ms. Carmichael also grabbed my arm, leaving these marks. I held up my wrist, showing the faint red lines her nails had left behind. Under state law, that constitutes simple assault. And since a child was involved, it's even more serious. Furthermore, obstructing a student's access to public school transportation violates educational access statutes. Brenda shot to her feet, her face twisted with outrage. "That's absurd. I was enforcing HOA rules." The other board members exchanged uneasy looks, some shifting uncomfortably in their seats. "Ms. Carmichael," I said calmly, No HOA regulation supersedes state law, and certainly none gives you the authority to detain residents, especially children, physically. And for the record, I reviewed our covenants in full this afternoon. There's nothing in them that regulates temporary items like backpacks, nor does the neighborhood color palette apply to personal belongings. Then I turned to the room. Now, I want to be clear. I'm not here to press charges, at least not yet. I'm here as a concerned resident and parent who believes this HOA has lost sight of its purpose. I gestured toward the back of the room. That's why I've invited County Inspector Hayes to join us tonight. She's prepared to conduct a full compliance review of Maplewood Terrace, HOA policies and enforcement practices. Brenda's face drained of color. Slowly, a woman in a county blazer rose from the back row, a badge clipped neatly to her lapel. "This is outrageous," Brenda sputtered. "You can't bring in outside authorities without board approval." Inspector Hayes stepped forward, her tone even and professional. "Actually, Ms. Carmichael, any resident can request a compliance review. And based on my preliminary findings, there are already signs of selective enforcement and potential harassment under county code." The room buzzed with murmurs. Brenda's composure cracked. "This is a coup," she shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at me. "He's using his position to intimidate me." Her voice climbed to a near scream. Then, in a burst of fury, she grabbed her massive binder of HOA regulations and hurled it across the room. I sidestepped easily, but the binder struck Inspector Hayes squarely on the shoulder. The crowd gasped. I immediately shifted into police mode, calm, deliberate. "Miss Carmichael," I said, stepping forward, "please place your hands behind your back. You're under arrest for assaulting a county official." Her eyes went wide. "You can't arrest me. I'm the HOA president." She protested as I gently turned her around and recited her Miranda rights. As I escorted her out, the remaining board members scrambled to regain control of the chaos. One of them quickly called for a vote. Within minutes, the decision was unanimous. Brenda Carmichael was officially removed as HOA president, effective immediately. "You can't do this to me," she wailed as we passed the community bulletin board where her framed photo still hung proudly. "Do you know how much I've done for this neighborhood? I've protected our property values. I've maintained our standards," but her words were drowned out by the murmurs of neighbors and the flash of a few cell phone cameras. The next morning, Brenda was released on bail, but not without consequences. She now faced misdemeanor assault charges and a restraining order, prohibiting her from coming within 100 feet of my son or our home. When she walked out of the county courthouse, she found a local news crew waiting. The story of a power-hungry HOA president arrested for assaulting a police chief's child was too good to pass up. As reporters shouted questions, Brenda tried to shield her face with her designer handbag, but the damage was already done. The cameras caught every moment, her smudged makeup, her trembling voice, her panic. "No comment," she shrieked, but it was too late. The footage spread through the community like wildfire. Brenda Carmichael's reign over Maplewood Terrace was finally over. Not remembered for her devotion to earth tones or her crusade for perfect lawns, but for her spectacular public downfall. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to subscribe to HOA Conflicts for more.